right, well, I feel like we certainly have a critical group to begin our program tonight, and I think more will join us over the next few minutes. But I want to just start with a few kind of introductions and acknowledgments because there's quite a few people here that I want to point out. First, I'm joined on stage by the chiefs, Chief Smith of the Wakefield Police Department and Chief Sullivan of the Wakefield Fire Department, and they are just such critical partners of mine and the Wakefield Public Schools, and I'm so pleased to be joined by them this evening. We also, I noted with us tonight, our Deputy Chief Calabrese from the Wakefield Police Department. I see Lieutenant Steve Scory with us tonight, and our school resource officers, Jason Skillings. Is Kelly here? She's on a call? They are very busy people. So our awesome school resource officers who are so very important to us. I also noted in the audience Town Administrator Steve Mayo. Steve, want to say hello? And I saw Maureen Butt, did I not? Selectman, thanks for coming, Maureen. And our new Town Emergency Management Systems Director, Tom Walsh, is here. Tom, do you mind standing up so they can see who you are? This is Tom, welcome. I am joined by my Assistant Superintendent, Doug Lyons. And then this whole group, just about everyone over here, is part of either our district or school crisis team, including our principals, assistant principals, teacher leaders, central office leaders at the district and school level. Could everyone that is serving on those teams please stand? I think it's just about everybody over here. So thank you so much. These are our crisis leaders for the district, and I think you probably see a lot of familiar faces. So thank you guys for being here, and they're an important part of tonight's program. I also just want to thank WCAT. I actually would have preferred to be down there closer to you to be able to walk around a little bit and maybe see a little bit better, but certainly we're recording our program tonight. A lot of parents had asked me if they couldn't come tonight, would they be able to find this program? And I said, you know what, we will make sure we have it taped and we can put it up on the website. You can either go to WCAT or we'll put it on the Wakefield Public Schools website so people can watch. So we are being recorded tonight, and I think that's a really positive thing, so thank you to WCAT. So what we thought we would do tonight, it just feels like over the last few months particularly, not just because of the Parkland, Florida shooting, but because of so many other factors, I feel like it just seemed like the right time to bring together parents, community members, to talk about school safety. I think we do so many positive things in the Wakefield Public Schools, and we keep growing and we continue to improve with the things that we do for school safety. But you know, so many parents came to me over the last few months and just asked many questions about what we do, how do we keep our kids safe, and kind of shared some of their anxiety or worries or concerns, and it just seemed like this would be a really good idea. So thank you so much for coming. We really appreciate your participation. What we thought we would do, we want this to be generally a pretty informal evening. This is not really a scripted agenda per se. We just wanted to be able to share a little information with you first. As I said in my advertisements for this, Chief Smith and I talked a little bit about sort of the three basic categories that we think are important for tonight. One, what are the school safety protocols? Second, what is threat assessment? And what does that look like? I think it's really important for parents to know what we mean by threat assessment and what goes into threat assessment. And then third, and perhaps the most important, is communication. Communication can be a pretty complex thing, and there's a lot to it, and things have changed. And I think we wanted to really kind of share some things with you. We also want you to have a chance to hear from the kind of the district crisis team and the school-based crisis teams just a little bit as well. So we're going to just talk to you a little bit, and then we will open things up for Q&A, which I think will be an important part of our discussion tonight, to kind of hear what's on your mind, what you want to know more about, the questions that you have. Probably as a group, we'll do sort of the more general things that might be helpful to everyone, and then we will break off for the last part and give you an opportunity for more personal questions or school-based questions. You may have noticed that in the lobby, our school-based crisis teams have set up a table for every school in the district, and There's even a table out there for those of you who need some help updating emergency contact information. If you have any trouble with that we can get some help out there. And that way people can kind of get some of that personalized information that you might want to know. I believe you got the handout tonight, just because kind of a little do you know fact sheet that the district crisis team put together. Just maybe just some of the questions that people ask of them all of the time. They thought it might be good just to share some of that information with you. So thank you to the crisis team for putting that together and sharing that tonight. So when we talked about a good place to start, sometimes, you know, when we talk, Chief Sullivan, Chief Smith, and I, and our teams, we often talk like real-life case studies. You know, let's talk about a real event that happened because it's so instructive of, you know, kind of everything that, that I've mentioned and that we want to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start with Chief Smith kind of telling kind of a recent story of an incident that occurred at the Northeast Vocational School. So I'm sure you all heard about it. I communicated out to my parents during that time. And I think it just kind of, it's pretty instructive, kind of all things and kind of what's happening today and how things are happening today, and it might be just a great way to start. So I'm gonna turn it over to Chief Smith for this piece.
Thank you, Kim. I think we have enough over here. Welcome, everybody. Just want to take a second to share with you the story of what happened a few weeks back and how we manage it. But before we start and before we go any further, I was asked this question at a selectmen's meeting a couple of weeks ago, and everybody wants to know, and at that meeting I was asked, are your kids safe? Are our schools safe? And I'll tell you unequivocally, they are safe. The next follow-up question after that is, can you guarantee that? Nope, I can't. Nor can the police department, fire department, or school department. But I can tell you right now, your schools are safe, your children are in the safest place they can be in during the school day, and we're going to continue to work together cooperatively and collaboratively with all the resources that we have available to make sure that the schools stay safe. Having said that, let's just get into the situation that happened a couple of weeks ago. It was based on an internet threat, and the internet seems to be, from the public safety perspective, the devil. And I have to say that because we have no control over it, we have no idea where stuff is coming from, and until we get deep into it, and it takes time to get deep into it, we have no idea of the authenticity or the author. So what happened was it was basically, I'll make it really simple, there was basically an internet threat, and we had to corroborate it. So the first thing that we did was we established contact with the school superintendent at the vocational school and their staff, and we went through our procedures up there. And we had talked about these procedures, they have procedures, we have procedures, and we walked through it, and it was decided that the best thing to do was to lock the school down, because we had a strong feeling that the kids were safer inside than anywhere else. We didn't want to put them out on the street, we didn't want to put them in the parking lot, because we could not control that. So we kept them locked down, and then we called Dr. Smith and the school department and asked them to shelter in place the high school and the Woodville school. So shelter in place is a lesser degree. Pretty much the students were allowed to wander free through the school. Maybe I shouldn't have said it that way. They're allowed to wander, they're allowed to leave their classes, but they're not allowed to leave the school. It's a great way, we learned after the marathon bombing, to control the situation that's really removed, and it worked very well. So those protocols worked very well, and what we did was, from that point forward, we started our investigation. Now, people have to understand that this is not TV. We don't solve these things in 59 minutes. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work, and it takes a lot of resources. And the resources are available because of the collaboration that your police department, your fire department, and the school department has with other professionals and other experts, as well as using protocols we have in place and training. We train for this. Police agency is very much like the military. We train, train, train. The fire does the same thing. We train, 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 and we train together. And we do that so that when we have a situation like the vocational school, it goes as smooth as we can make it go. They did an excellent job. I don't know if there's anyone from that community here, but they did an incredible job that morning trying to sort things out. We finally found out that the threat was actually not targeted to the north. It was Northeast High School, was how it got to us. And we found out after a pretty in-depth investigation, and we felt very confident, the threat was actually in Anne Arundel County down in Maryland. It was a real deal, but it was down there. So it turned out to be an excellent drill for us. It was a live drill. As we say in the business, it was a live fire drill. And we handled it the same way that we would handle a live situation. So we came out of it unscathed. We decided by the time the school day had transpired, we decided we might as well let them go early because otherwise it was almost 1:30, 2 o'clock. We managed the media. We had a good run on how to manage media. But one of the biggest issues we had was what was being thrown around on the internet. We got more information inside that school from what parents were seeing on the websites, different social media platforms that were completely untrue. They were completely false. And we knew it. And trying to control that is pretty much impossible. So that's one of the things we're going to talk about a little bit later is how do we manage communication like that. None of that came from official sources. It didn't come from the vocational school people. It didn't come from Wakefield Public Schools. It didn't come from the fire department. And we know certainly it didn't come from the police department. So we managed that. We managed the release of the students. We got them. We did it in an orderly fashion that we plotted out. They left in a certain fashion. But one of the biggest issues we had, and I call it the Sandy Hook syndrome, is that parents wanted to be on the campus and they wanted to see their children, and we understand that, but we couldn't let it happen because it would have been complete chaos. And that being a street, when you think about it, it's a one-way street, it's a dead-end street, and that creates a problem for us. So we had to divert resources to make sure that we kept the area secure and we were able to do our investigation, and if we can't do that, we can't keep your children safe. So we were able to do it to the best of our ability. We learned from it, and we will take steps in the future to make sure that this doesn't happen again. So that was basically it. We're still in the process of doing an after action, even though we've had a conversation about it, but our policies and protocols require, we do it after the 4th of July, we do it after any big event we have in town. The police department does an after action report, and we learn from our mistakes, and we study what we did well. And then we not only study what we did well, but we study what we can do better. So I know there'll be questions on that afterwards, so that's basically what happened, and I think maybe it's a good case study, as Dr. Smith said, that we can talk about it. There are no secrets up there. But what I'm trying to do, and I think what the police managers that are here, Jason Skillings, who's our school resource officer down at the high school, Deputy Chief Calabrese, and Lieutenant Scory, what we're trying to do is ensure that communication is real and it goes to us. And based on that communication, we want you as parents, as staff, well, we know the staff, but we want the parents to understand that you can trust us and we know what we're doing. And that goes for the school department, goes for the fire department, goes for emergency management, it goes for all of us. We study this constantly. This is what keeps chiefs up at night. I know it keeps this chief up at night, but you can trust us to do the right thing. You can trust us that the information we're going to give you is the information that should be out there, needs to be out there, and is sensitive to your needs as parents and your needs as a resident or a citizen of the community. And you're going to hear that. I'm going to say it a million times tonight. You have to trust us. You put us in a position of trust and faith, and we're going to do everything to mitigate the situation, make sure you get your answers, and make sure that your children get home safely at the end of the day. Just like when Chief Sullivan and I go to work every morning, our job is to make sure that the personnel that work in our respective agencies go home at the end of their shift. We have the same philosophy for your children every day when they go to school. You are the biggest captive audience in the town of Wakefield. The vocational school is the biggest captive audience for those 12 communities that we serve up there. So I don't know if, with my MC. I don't, Kim, you want to pass it off?
If you don't mind grabbing your mic, I
Okay,
Ask a question. Chief, could you just tell the audience a little bit just about who NEMLEC Stars are and you know, how they partner with us for these kinds of incidents?
Yeah, if I can get this mic out. I'm just not follically challenged, I'm IT challenged too. NEMLEC Stars, for those who don't understand it, the town of Wakefield is part of NEMLEC, which is the Northeastern Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council. It's a consortium of 61 law enforcement agencies. There's 59 police departments and 2 sheriff's departments, Essex County, Middlesex County. In that, we have an incredible amount of resources that we use, and what it is a force multiplier for us. If we need outside assistance, for instance, if we need a tactical team, we have a tactical team available to us in which some of our officers are members. If we need a rapid response team, a large platoon, what we call a pop platoon, we have that access. We have members that we give to NEMLEC. If we need a command vehicle like you see on the 4th of July in town here, we have access to that. In fact, Lieutenant Scory is the OIC on that. So we make a large contribution. Part of NEMLEC, if you go under the umbrella of NEMLEC, there's what we call the STARS. STARS, School Threat Assessment Response System, started after Columbine. And immediately after Columbine, NEMLEC not being 61 agencies at that point was much smaller. We met in Burlington, and we decided that we had to do something. So we put together a STARS protocol, and a STARS protocol is made up of police, fire, mental health people, school people, and STARS is available to us to help us do a threat assessment on whatever is going on. We use it for threats, guns, bombs, suspicious packages, but we also use the other side of it. If you have a death of a student or a death of a teacher, something that's traumatic to the student body, we have the option to call STARS in, and STARS will help us mitigate that situation, and they'll work with the students, they'll work with the staff. We have used it at the vocational school, unfortunately, in the last year twice for deaths up there, and we've used it for other reasons up there too. So it's an incredible resource for us. So as far as the town of Wakefield goes, if we were to have a situation at any of our schools, again, whether it be the death of a student or whatever it could be, we have the option based on threat assessment by the police chief, the school department, the fire chief, mental health people that are volunteers. We make a threat assessment, and then we decide if we need STARS to come in. And STARS is a different level. They have different levels. They have 1 or 2 people who will come, they'll do a phone consult with us, or we can actually bring them on site. And like we did at the vocational school, we called for a full STARS call out, and they sent up a team that was gonna help us. Fortunately, by the time they got there, everything had been settled down, and we kind of sorted out what had happened. So it's a tremendous resource, and quite frankly, it costs the town of Wakefield nothing. And we'll continue to be a member of NEMLEC and have that STARS piece available to us. They're all, from the police side, they're all sworn police officers from different communities within those 60 jurisdictions. So.
And thank you very much. It's a great explanation. And one of the reasons I wanted to mention NEMLEC Stars is we have trained members of NEMLEC Stars on the school side as well. We're guided by Jane Farrow, who was a retired assistant principal of Wakefield High School, is currently serving on NEMLEC Stars as an administrator. Jason Levine, he is a psychologist at Wakefield High School. He's a leader of the guidance group and counseling group, the STARS, NEMLEC Stars team. AJ Beebe, head of guidance at Wakefield High School, is an active member of STARS, and I have a great history with NEMLEC Stars as well. I've been on school and district crisis teams in Wakefield for almost 20 years, and I was a member of NEMLEC Stars. And the reason that's so important is when you serve as a NEMLEC Star, anyone else? Am I missing anybody that's currently on? When you serve on the NEMLEC Stars team, you go through monthly monthly trainings all year long that involve threat assessment, and you serve on a team as a school administrator or a school liaison. And when you do that, that means that if you're on team 4, every 4th week your team is on, and if there's any kind of a school threat during that time, your team is called out and you go. So over the course of the last however many years, I personally have been to many dozens and dozens of school threat incidents all around the NIMLIC region, as have Jason and Jane. And so this sort of like, we've got a really strong, valuable kind of background and experience. And the reason that's so valuable to us in Wakefield, my feeling is the reason I always want to have NIMLIC STARS trained people on the school side of things, is the experience you get going out to these incidents. It's pretty much getting some live training and kind of experiencing those things many times over. So if something should happen in Wakefield, we've already kind of lived through some of it and have some good ideas about how to respond. But I think that's really important. So thank you for that. And maybe Chief Sullivan will join me up here for a moment to talk about a little bit about our school safety protocols that we have in place. So of course we have daily security at all of our buildings, and some of you may have some questions about that, but certainly since Columbine, daily security has changed dramatically from the way it used to be pre-Columbine, but our buildings are secured and secured entry during the day. And then we have a few basic school safety protocols that you've probably heard of and you might be familiar with, but starting with just your basic evacuation. We have 3 levels of evacuation: level 1, level 2, and level 3. Your level 1 evacuation, and these are pretty much just safeguarding students in the event of some kind of threatening situation inside the building, like fire.
Gas leak or fire.
Gas leak, right?
Chemical spill. Like
Yep, anything, some kind of a threat within the building. And the evacuation, a level 1 is basically moving the students outside of the building. They stay relatively near the site, but we take attendance and we account for all of our kiddos and we keep them outside until the fire department or police department clears us to go back into the school. We do have a level 2, at least at the middle school and high school, and that basically is an opportunity if there's really like significant weather conditions outside and we have to hold the kids outside a little bit longer and it's pouring rain, for example. The fire department does a great job for us and they can clear the gymnasium as a safe space for us. They can go in, make sure the gym is clear, and then we can move the students inside to that location, while we're, getting ready to evaluate whether we can get the kids back into other parts of the school and back to class. And finally, the level 3 evacuation is we've already evacuated the building, we're outside, but for whatever that threat is deemed to be significant enough that we need to move the students further away from the school. We don't want them near the school at all. And every school has a level 3 site, many of which are walking distance. If we need bus transportation, we'll take transportation. But in certain events, we're prepared to take the student body elsewhere in Wakefield. So that's pretty much our evacuation protocol.
Yeah, it's important to note that we do practice all of our evacuation drills every year. So we don't just do the 4 fire drills that are required by law. We also do the 1 evacuation drill. We physically move the student body, faculty, and staff to at least one of their evacuation sites.
And believe me, he is a stickler for timing us. He's got that clock going and he's watching it, and as a building principal, he puts a lot of pressure on us to move those kids fast. And it's great because the kids know that you don't just leave, you leave quickly and efficiently. And so I think we do a really nice job with that. Chief Smith mentioned a shelter in place. Now, shelter in place is more about some kind of a threat that's outside of the school, not inside of the school. So we've already mentioned one example. There was an issue happening at the vocational school that may not imminently affect us, but we are pretty close on the campus at the high school and the Woodville school, so that it was a good decision to say we're going to move into a shelter in place at that time. And that's really just to safeguard the students for something. It could be a dangerous person at large in the community. Let's say the police call us and say there's been a bank robbery downtown. We may put all of our schools into a shelter in place if that individual or individuals are still at large. In fact, we're likely to do that. It could be, it also could be some kind of a hazardous chemical release or something in the area. Or it could be
severe weather incident. We've
right.
certainly had our share of severe thunderstorms and so forth in the last few years.
Yep. And even with those, for every single severe weather event, we have a very specific plan. Our crisis teams have developed a plan for a tornado, a plan for a hurricane, severe lightning, like pretty much any major weather event that could come on very suddenly. We know exactly if and it's a tornado is a pretty rare thing in this area, but it has happened. There was one in Saugus just a year or two ago or something. So
they're becoming more frequent.
yeah, and so we have a plan for where to put your students exactly during a tornado and how to move there very quickly. So that's shelter in place. Basically, I just try to keep it super simple. Basically, the exterior doors are already secure, but we always do a double check on the shelter in place. But we basically keep our gym classes inside. No outdoor recess. We keep the students inside. Chief Smith, they actually don't wander. The students don't wander about freely, as you might have indicated. When we go into a shelter in place, you did, particularly at the high school level or the secondary level where students may travel. When we're in shelter in place, the students may not travel. They have to stay in their classrooms. Teacher just double checks, make sure their door is locked should we need to go into some kind of emergency situation. But pretty much teaching and learning just resumes, and we kind of carry on. But teachers know if they're in shelter in place that the students should not be out of the classroom for any reason, and the principal would determine at a certain time if we're changing classes and the schedule. Most of the time in a shelter in place it's perfectly fine to do that, but you just kind of change classes and just kind of carry on. But a shelter in place is just sort of an alert that there could be something on the outside. And then the next important safety protocol is our lockdown. I think most of you are pretty familiar with that. And that is when there's a threat that exists inside the building and evacuation is not possible or not the right thing to do. And that could be an intruder, an irate person, an active shooter, any of those kinds of scenarios. And the teachers are well trained and administration are well trained on how to safeguard kids in the lockdown situation. In recent years, as you know, we've evolved to our ALICE protocol. And basically what that does is it just kind of enhances real-time communication. It enhances options to counter an armed intruder or to evacuate the building if safe to do so. So we can get into more details about ALICE if you would like in a little bit, but it really just kind of expands that, after Columbine, we all learned the lockdown procedure, and since then we've learned an awful lot more and have really kind of taken those more advanced steps to the ALICE protocol. Everything that we do is in terms of practicing, is age appropriate. From our preschool, where the students wouldn't be expected to know or do certain things, all the way through 12th grade, where really we have kind of young men and women all around us. So there's really a range of kind of responsibility and knowledge that kids have, but kids practice everywhere. And at the youngest levels, what they know is to listen to their teacher. That's really the focus, is you listen to your teacher's instructions and follow your teacher's instructions. And as kids get a little bit older, they learn a little bit more and they kind of know, what's happening and kind of a part of that communication. But our kids practice, annually, which is very, very important. And then finally, our parent reunification plan. So you may or may not know that we have very specific detailed plans to reunify kids with their parents in the event that we need to do so. The Doll Bear practiced a year ago, I think. Was anyone here for that? Any parents of the Doll Bear kids? So you guys actually tried it. And it was great that for the district crisis team, the Doll Bear their team volunteered to actually run a parent unification protocol. And when we run a drill like that, it's to kind of learn if we have any gaps, places that we have to improve. So, but we have a very, very detailed plan about how to get you reunited with your kids. Now, under a I guess I would say like a soft emergency situation, even if we're in shelter in place, if you needed to dismiss your child and we're in a shelter in place or something kind of a soft or, not a critical situation, you all, as a parent, you are always the decision maker on when you want to take your child home. We're never going to say, no, you may not dismiss your child. The only time we may say, you may not dismiss your child right now, is what Chief Smith said, is when we're in a higher level emergency, if we're in lockdown or something like that. In those circumstances, you will eventually be able to get your child, but it will be a very specific procedure to do so. And I think Chief Smith will talk a little bit more about how important it is to just, as anxiety-provoking as it is or may be, you just have to know we are keeping your children safe, and we don't want to compromise that. So we want to make sure that we have a very deliberate and intentional and clear way of dismissing students to their parents. And we do that very, very carefully so we don't put anyone in danger. So we have all of those protocols. And then, before I'd like to bring up just 3 reps from district high school, middle school, and elementary school, just say a few more words about those. I do want to just reiterate, though, that in addition to all of this reactive work that we are prepared for, probably the very most important thing we do is the proactive work of trying to create really good school cultures where students really trust their teachers, have great relationships with their teachers, and I think we really have that in the Wakefield Public Schools, so that if a student knows about something or is worried about something or worried about someone, I can't tell you how much we emphasize that relationship, so our students will tell us if something is wrong. And the school culture is the #1 protective factor for schools. So if I may, I'd like to invite Brian Robertson from Wakefield High School, Andrew Tetall from Galvin Middle School, and TJ Liberty from Dahlbeer Elementary School to just come up and just give you a quick little overview of our what our crisis teams do or are doing. And what they practice. These guys are just great representatives of the work that we're doing.
Thank you, Kim. I think I'm going to lead us off right now, and I'm going to take 2 hats. First, give a little overview of our district crisis team, things that we do as a team, and who comprises our district crisis team, and then also talk from my purview as the chair of the high school crisis team. So, starting with the district, once a month we meet with representatives from each of our schools, with our representatives from the Wakefield Police Department and Wakefield Fire Department, as well as some key stakeholders throughout the district and central administration, to break down and just discuss what's going on as a district. We look at our plans, our district crisis plan, kind of as a living, breathing document that's continually reviewed and revised based on what we're doing. We also, we started out our program tonight talking a little bit about case studies. One of, I think, the most valuable things we do as a district crisis team is have case studies of what have events that have transpired here in the school district, what we've done right, what would improve on, how we can continually learn from the things that are happening and further support, the children that we work with. Additionally, at a district crisis team, we do table talk exercises, trying to replicate potential events that could happen, bring people together, and see how we can, what kind of gaps we might have in our existing plans, how we can better communicate as a district. I think one of the things that we've really grown in as a team is over the last few years really streamlining our communication. Someone working in a system, I'm just very impressed of how quickly sometimes we get information out to families and parents, and how hard that can be when you're in the middle of a critical event, to be able to then actually mobilize people, create messaging that's accurate and timely, and get that out. It's something we continually think about and talk about at the district crisis team level, and try to work and improve on. I feel like that we do a great job of that, and I'm just, as a parent and then receiving these messages, while they're happening is, I'm saying, pretty impressive. So these are some of the things that we do on a monthly basis. Then we go back after these meetings and meet as our building-based teams. Each building has their own kind of crisis plans that are continually reviewed and looked at, and kind of share that information, so that the information at the top kind of spreads out throughout the district. So speaking of our building at Wakefield High School, and the things we have on our building-based crisis team, all members of our school administration, our nurse, custodial staff. We have from our food services, all of our school counselors and school psychologists, a member of our faculty. We get together also on a monthly basis to talk about what's going on at Wakefield High School, looking at things like, this year, recent policy adopted that administrators, we have somebody at each of our, entrances in the morning. So somebody greeting students, making sure that there's eyes on people coming in is something that, we've instituted at the high school this year. Another thing, that we talk a lot about too is our kind of protective factors, as Dr. Smith alluded to, and the things that we're proactively doing to think about students, and how we respond and try to support them, mental health, how we partner with agencies such as Elliott Crisis, who over the last several years, if a student is experiencing emotional distress and needs treatment, when I started, the route was to go sit at an emergency room and maybe wait for 7 or 8 hours before being screened and having an evaluation. Now we have a partnership where people can come to the school or come to a student family's home and be able to look to do an evaluation there in a more comfortable setting and be able to kind of get right to the heart of how we can support these students and get them the services that they need. Another outreach that we've had over the last several years is the creation of a social, emotional, behavioral health team, a team of psychologists that we meet once every other month, representatives from every school. We also have community partners like Catherine Dingra from the Wakefield Coalition. We have members from Elliott Crisis and other agencies, and just talk collaboratively about how we are supporting our students, supporting their needs, and how we are looking after each other, and taking these proactive measures of the things that we can control here in the district, in looking after people and trying to keep each other safe. So these are some of the things that we're doing across the district to try to collaboratively and proactively look after our students. I would say just as a few other pieces for our district, those of you who have been to Wakefield High School know it's a very far-reaching building going a lot of different directions. We've done a job of increasing the amount of radios we have. Now there's over a dozen people throughout all areas of the building, have the ability to talk to each other. Our school resource officer, Jay Skillings, has a radio with a direct line to the police department, so it can be in communication instantaneously as needed. If we have a situation, and we have, where we have a shelter in place, we have a building communications team who fans out over the building, so they're stationed in different areas to be able to be kind of watching out for our students. So, some of the approaches we use, and we are constantly, every September and October is our kind of building safety months where we practice. Not only do we have our required 4 fire drills, which are important, led by Chief Smith in the fire department, but we also practice in Alice, some Alice situations and drills. We actually go up to the vocational school, which is our level 3 evacuation site, and practice that route. We, as a faculty, always practice our level 2 evacuation, which we've had to employ it several times over the last several years. So these are things we continually practice. We debrief afterwards and try to just get better and learn from what we're doing. So some other thoughts before I pass it on, and I'm sure there's going to be more specific questions with our Q&A, but just thinking coming up here as a parent, I'm a parent of a 5th grader and a 2nd grader, and I say it kind of pains me in some ways that my children and yours have to think about school safety in ways that I didn't have to think about it, and probably you didn't have to think about it when you were growing up. But I would say conversely, as a high school educator, it inspires me how thoughtful students can be in thinking about these situations. Was just relayed to me from one of the students I work with that a student just had done a kind of a Wakefield talk show with Chief Smith over the past week, talking about thoughtfully talking about some of these issues. I think they'll be coming on WCIT soon for a plug. But also I can say as an anecdote, I had a student that approached me and found out my role, a student who's on our academic advisory council, asking to lead kind of a student survey regarding our ALICE drills and how we can continually adopt those and revise those and getting more student perspective, and just into seeing that, and just had a conversation with her just yesterday. The thought she has and thinking about what things we can do is just so impressive, and just such a great reminder of how we continually search out student voice, and they know, in what they see, and reminding them to speak up. If you see something, say something is the great adage that so rings true in so many situations. And as parents, if you have things to, obviously you're a thoughtful audience who cares about this topic and is invested. If you have things that you feel that we could benefit us, and that you've seen, or you've heard your children discuss, please share. It takes a truly community effort in these situations, and we just continue, I think, looking to grow and listen, and and continually evolve our policies to be able to meet the world we live in. So that's a little bit from the high school perspective and district perspective. Now I'm going to pass it on to Andrew Tetroth to talk a little bit about the Galvin.
Thank you, Brian. So, I'll try to be succinct here, and so I know there's a lot of questions and answers, and hopefully answers that you all want to get to. So, here at the Galvin, obviously the newest school in the district, and there are some incredible features, safety features that we get to use and implement every day, just because the building itself is so brand new. But just location-wise, right, as far as all the other schools go, location-wise, we are the closest to the safety building downtown. So obviously the response time is pretty quick if there were ever to be a situation where we need to call on them. Obviously the new building, you've come in here many times, that we've got the double door locking system, and it is, if you've ever been here in the mornings or during the school day, all the doors are always locked, and you got to ring the bell, and you can hear the loud clicks and everything. It is a very secure building during the day. Some of the other neat features of this school, obviously we have cameras in all the hallways and on the exterior of the school, which obviously it helps us to keep the building safe and kind of know what's happening outside, what's happening indoors. We have the building doors on the interior part of the building. If there is a fire drill, if there's something, they do automatically close to help seal off and prevent any other injuries or further situations that might endanger the students. So they close automatically, which is a nice new feature for this school. The classrooms, obviously, they're all brand new. They all lock from the inside. There's double doors connecting to another classroom, which is obviously great if we ever needed to use another classroom. We have a full-time officer, Officer Tobine, who is very active in our school, walking around the halls in the main office. Her office is stationed in the main office, right where the entrance is, and she is someone who's out and about in the mornings, in the afternoons. You'll see her, and she's very active with the students. Does a lot of getting to know them and building relationships at the younger level, all the way up through the 8th grade as well. Nurse, obviously, safety, when you think about safety in broad terms, a full-time nurse, and then every other day we have another nurse that joins, so there's 2 every other day here, and she is great. She's a parent as well, so very committed to the school and to this, obviously, this district. AEDs on every floor, right at the main stairwell, which is obviously, in case of an emergency, cardiac or whatever it might be, are accessible all right there within this building as well. Phones, communication, all the phones in the classrooms can obviously dial within, but also make calls out, and all the staff know what that combo is to get out as well. There are walkie-talkies. I just realized I still have mine on my hip, and what we haven't talked about yet, but the walkie-talkies now some of them are district-wide, so we can actually radio high school central office or elementary schools if there happens to be a situation where we need to quickly get out. But there is the staff that has them, our admin, obviously, school resource officer, nurse, some of our student support staff, some teachers, some paras, phys ed staff, obviously if they're outside. And so there's a lot of communication, and they make up our communication team, as we've alluded to earlier. If there ever needs to be a time where there's a shelter in place and students may be in classes, and so we then position the communication team in different areas, and we all have walkies, and we're able to communicate out to students and teachers if need be with situations like that. We, admin staff are on social media. We try to stay active that way, and again, all part of what Dr. Smith said and Brian about building the culture of our building, of the district, but that is the number one thing that we try to do here. Every day we say do the right thing and take care of one another. We really just try to be proactive in that way and making sure that every kiddo feels safe, that feels like they have a place to come here. And many parents in here, I know in the audience, can attest to that. Supervision-wise, we as well, admin and staff are out in the mornings. You probably see me in the crosswalk, stopping traffic and crossing people. And we've got admin and staff at the doors in the morning to make sure that only students and people that we know coming in and anyone that might not have a badge or whatever is immediately stopped and asked and redirected to go to the main office for a check-in and whatnot. And then obviously, as we talked about, we practicing all of our drills every year. Our level 2 obviously is the gym, which we can use. We've been able to do. But now level 3, we have actually 2 sites. Being the biggest school in the district, we have the ability to actually go to the Civic Center with our lower kids, our 5th and 6th graders. A nice short little walk there, and then the older students will go to St. Joe's. And we those were, if we ever needed to, as we've explained in the level 3, need to get to a place further away from the buildings, those are our sites for that. So I don't want to be redundant, but I'm going to pass it off to TJ, and obviously if there's any other questions specifically with the Galvin, we'll be at the table afterwards.
Thank you, Andrew. I'm here to represent the pre-K to 4, early childhood in elementary schools. You are going to hear a little bit of redundancy, but I think it's important that you know that there's a lot of consistency amongst all our schools and our procedures. And that's for a number of different reasons. Studies have done and shown that the protocols we have in place are to keep your kids safe. And also it helps if the students know this consistency when they go from school to school. There's an understanding that the procedures, although evacuation sites might be different, but the procedures are the same. So all our elementary schools, like our middle and high school, have a building-based crisis team that's made up of school administration and staff representatives from various kind of portions of our school. We also have representatives that serve on the district crisis team, to a school administrator and a staff representative, as well as our school psychologists also serve on the social, emotional, behavioral health team as well. We also have, like all our schools, a building communication team, and it's an essential portion of our school to help to get information out, to help address emergency situations and do it in a very calm and collected way. We also, at all schools, will review our safety procedures with staff annually, whether it be level 1, level 2, level 3 evacuations, as well as our ALICE protocols, which you'll hear more about, I'm sure, and shelter in place. Each year, our staff and students do practice these drills. We usually do them in the fall, early on when the weather's good. Chief Sullivan has been a great partner with our fire drills. Like Dr. Smith says, he's very on top of us with timing to make sure that we're efficiently getting out of the building and in a safe way. We also have, as Andrew and Brian had talked about, radios that are deployed throughout the building, and one of the great things this year and last year is the district has invested in digital-based instead of analog-based radios, which are very important because the communication is much clearer and you have a wider range to be able to get to all parts of the building. And so communication has been much clearer, and it's an important thing when we start talking about safety protocols. Lastly, just talking about safety in general when students are arriving and departing school. At the elementary level, there are staff members that are posted at the entrances to welcome students in and as they depart from school. And then once school begins, like it is in all of our district, our doors are locked and there is only one entry point that parents or visitors can come in, and they're all located right where the main office is, where there's visibility and someone to check them in and help them to direct them on their way. So we hope to answer any questions that you might have. And now I'd like to turn it back over to Dr. Smith.
Thank you to all three of you, and at any point, any of your questions that you want to direct directly to a school principal or team member, you can do that. So 2 more quick things, and then we'll get to your questions. The first is threat assessment. I mentioned that a little while ago. And threat assessment, I think in layperson's terms, so I'm kind of a layperson, so I'll kind of, Chief has much more intricate, telling of what a threat assessment is. But if you think about threat assessment, it's really kind of maybe establishing maybe at 4 levels, not credible would be the lowest, then maybe a low, a medium, and a high. 99% of what we deal with would be on the lower end. We always use our protocols, regardless of where we may ultimately evaluate a situation to be. We don't take any chances with kids' safety, but we immediately go into threat assessment. I don't know, Chief, do you have a few words just about like what threat assessment, what's involved? I can certainly talk from a perspective that parents can understand, but maybe you might want to add to that a little bit.
Thank you, Dr. Smith. Before we get into that, though, I just want to say one thing. One of the successes that we do have, and we have had, is communication. When we talked about the vocational school, that information came from a very diligent student who was smart enough to go to their parent and talk about what that student had seen on their Snapchat. And that is crucial to us because we want and this is part of threat assessment, because it gives legitimacy to the threat, or it reduces legitimacy, one or the other. So having that communication and having that collaboration with students, staff, teachers, the police, our SROs, we love the fact that our students, talk to our SROs. Kelly just walked in the back, I think. I can't really see you from here, but you look like Kelly with these lights. Kelly is here at the Galvin. She's right at home here tonight. But the point is that communication it's critical to us. And if a child sees something, or like you said, Dr. Smith, see something, hear something, say something, the other part of that is do something. And the do something is we want the student to go to a teacher, go to a staff or whoever it is and share that with us so we can get going on our threat assessment. Threat assessment is not done in a vacuum. It's done mutually. It's done with everybody because before we can take it from a minor level to a major level, or from a major level or high level to a low level, we have to have as much information as we can. And that's where we all sit together, we sit in a room, we have a conversation about it. It starts from the call, and we're texting back and forth to establish the veracity, where it came from, how it got to us. Was it by social media? Did somebody walk in and talk about having a knife or a gun? Did somebody say there's something in a backpack? And then we go from there and we take a look at the student. Is the student someone that we know about? Something that has gone on in the past? Is there something going on at home with that student? Is there not? Is this something just out of the blue? So we start and we build it from that. Now that takes a little bit of time. And like I said, we don't do it in 59 minutes with commercials. We just sit down and we dig right into it, and we use every resource we have, whether the resource is internal or external. And we build it from there. And from that point, we make a collective decision on how we're going to manage it, whether we're going to call in outside resources, whether we're going to shelter in place, whether we're going to evacuate, or whether we're going to lock down the students. We're always going to err on the side of caution, because our goal is to make sure that the schools are always going to stay the safest place for your children every day. So, I mean, that's it in a nutshell. I don't want to get into tactics. I don't want to give up all our secrets, but I can tell you that that's how it's done, and it's done on a regular basis. But it certainly is not. It's not a decision made by one person driving very quickly to your school to figure out what's going on. Everybody is in the loop, and that's basically how it works. We do have levels, as Kim said. We do have levels, but every case is different. It could be different because of the weather. It could be different. The weather can change your threat assessment. What are we going to do with the students? We can't put them out in the sleet and snow. What do we do with them? How does that? That changes the threat assessment. It could be the time of year. It could be the building. We have buildings like the Greenwood, which are old, and we have a building like this, where there's cameras, where there's a lot of information that we can glean that will help us on our assessment of really what's going on. You go to the Greenwood, that's an old school with a lot of doors. This school is built for a purpose. It has what we call target hardening items in the school, which make it easier for us to work through. So depending on where the student is, where the school is, the cause of the threat, how we got it, the weather, could be anything, will change that threat assessment.
Right, so that's great. And let's segue to our last piece, which is communication. And then we'll open it up to questions. So communication is by far the hardest part of all of this right now. Things have changed so much. I just think about how much easier it was to be a school principal or a superintendent, maybe even 10 years ago. But I think, the cell phone in every person's hands and social media has made communication just that much more complex. So often, if something happens or occurs, kids are texting their parents, or it's on social media almost immediately before we might even know what's going on. And the rumors start to go, and that's where it becomes very, very difficult. I think back to the Voke incident a few weeks ago. I mean, it was hard, being on the outside of that, down at Wakefield High School, where my office is. I think that the helicopters were there, the TV media were there, and lots of folks were there, kind of pouring into the spot before really I even knew what was happening, and which really puts us at this just disadvantage right away, and it's made it hard for us, hasn't it, Chief? And I rely very much on our police department. They do a fantastic job to relay information, and I know that my job is to make sure that the information I communicate to parents is factual, and that what comes out to you is always factual. And I know that sometimes it's a little bit frustrating because people want to know more than we can give at a certain time. Again, it really comes back to the trust factor, that we know what we're doing and that we are trying to give you the pertinent information you need at the moment. And it's hard, I think harder now than ever before, because I do think sometimes, I always encourage people to email me or call me if you have a question, and people do. So once I've sent something out, I try to stay connected, and I keep looking at my email in case someone has a question. And someone might just say, Kim, I'm so nervous. I have a 6-year-old over at the Greenwood School. Should I go get her? And I'm so glad that the person comes directly to me, because I can either call them or I can email them right back and say, there is no imminent danger. You do not need to do that. Trust me, everything's okay. Whatever it might be, we might be able to do some of that, like kind of personalized touch when needed. But we really work hard to get that information out to you, the factual information, as quickly as we can. There was an issue at the high school earlier this year where some rumors went around amongst students. I think it was on a Sunday night. And again, this is how complicated it gets. Fortunately, a super responsible student, emailed myself and Mr. Metropolis late that evening and said, we just want you to know, something seems to be going around, and this is sort of what we're hearing. But it was just sort of, so the two of us just got up, in the morning, and I saw it. I'm on my way in. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. I'm calling Rich and saying, Rich, you hear, what is this about? What do you think this is about? I mean, neither of us had any idea. Well, it was everywhere amongst, kids and other folks. And I think that in the realm of communication, it puts us in a pretty challenging spot, because we don't even know what we're dealing with. We have no idea what people are talking about, what might be involved, how serious it is. Is it serious? Is it a rumor? Is it what's happening? So we try to get something out, and then immediately consult with the police. Chief and I put out a statement maybe that morning at about 9:30 in the morning, I want to say, saying this is a non-credible threat. And so they had gone through a very thorough threat evaluation to understand whether or not there was a threat imminent or not. And we put that out, but by that point there was, I think, so many rumors out there that it's a little bit hard even for people to accept. What if they're not telling us the truth? Has anyone ever felt that way? Maybe they're hiding something. Be honest. Does anyone ever feel that way? I feel like people feel like that. It's okay to be honest about that. I do. I feel like parents sometimes feel like, oh my gosh, maybe they're just not telling us everything. Maybe they're, they're kind of keeping information from us. And I can only assure you it's not like that. We are very, very thorough. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But I do think this is why communication becomes such a critical and difficult piece. And as the information becomes more available to us, we know more and we can communicate more factual information, we will continue to send it out. So even the vocational day, you saw something came out from me that said, I went directly to Woodville and high school parents first. We're in shelter in place. This is what that means. There's no imminent danger at this time. And then within the half hour, I believe I went out to the entire community just to let everybody know, because I know people are on, Facebook or they're out there, let everybody know. But at that point, I did not know what was going on. I was waiting for some kind of information or clarity, but just I kind of had that general sense. And then once I had more information, I got more information out, and I got the all clear out. And then once we had the information from Chief Smith, I don't know if you remember, I sent you the information from Chief Smith, so now you knew exactly what had occurred. So that's kind of the complexity of the communication piece.
Just to follow up on what Dr. Smith said, there's another piece to this, and that's the media, the mainstream media. Because everything that goes out on social media, the mainstream media is watching. So, we always have, in the police department, and Chief Sullivan will probably say the same thing, the worst thing that could ever happen is have the chief show up in the morning, there'd be a satellite truck in front of the station. Someone's going to hang, because that means it's been out there. And the problem is that once it's out there, it's a proverbial bullet. You cannot call it back. And that becomes a distraction for what we're trying to accomplish. When we have an event, and a perfect example is what happened a couple of weeks ago up at the vocational school, was we had to manage the media. We wanted to get the information out on the mainstream media. And that's the importance of some of our operations and people, PIO or whoever we've assigned to do that. That is a huge piece, because that's what people are seeing. Believe it or not, when you get something like we had at the vocational school, or if you have a toxic release of some type of chemical or a plume or whatever, once it gets out, people start talking on social media, it goes to the mainstream media, and it's not uncommon to get calls from people like CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. They all want the story, especially if it's a school, because it's the sexy stuff that sells, and they love that stuff about schools. Even though incidents in schools are less than 0.5% in all the events that happen in this country every day, less than that we respond to in an emergency, it's less than 0.5%. That's a really small number, but it makes such a big headline. So we have to deal with that, and that takes time and resources, but we want to get the information out as soon as possible. So the message here is that we are your trusted sources. And like Dr. Smith said, that morning, on that Monday morning, everything was flying all over the place. We have no control over it. Even if we were the best of the best, and I think we do a pretty good job, there's no way we can control that. And that is a distraction. It's a distraction for you. It worries parents. It worries administrators. And it causes us to be focused and probably maybe in the wrong direction. So, and we have to check those tips out. If somebody says that there's, oh, by the way, I have a Snapchat picture that came from room 123 and a gun on the floor, we could be standing in room 123, but we have to confirm that, because as soon as it gets out there, it becomes gospel. So again, unless you hear it directly from Chief Sullivan and the police and fire department, the police department, or the school department, who are trusted sources, I wouldn't put my faith in it. And that's why we're here tonight, to talk about that. And hopefully everybody will understand the mission that we have to do. But communication is a huge piece from us, but it's also the piece that I talked about earlier, about your children going to the right people, making the call for us, and then we can get in there early and hopefully mitigate it. And we don't lose any school time, we don't lose any learning time, and everybody goes home safe.
So I think at this point, we'd love to hear from you and your questions. WCAT set up a microphone in the back if you want to walk to the microphone. I'm noticing Chris Callahan, school committee member out there. Hi, Chris. Thank you. And Kelly Tobine has arrived since we started here. So, bring your questions to us. What's on your mind?
Kim, I want to do this. I have to do this. I have to do this. It's just like town meeting in the West. Okay, now I feel
live at
better.
20 Stedman Street.
You don't need to say your name and address, that's okay.
So I'm Shauna Balf. I have a first grader and a third grader at the Walton School. And thank you for this. I actually feel a lot better tonight, so I really appreciate the information. But I wanted to talk about the intersection of student privacy rights under the Family Educational Right to Privacy Act, so FERPA, safety concerns, and then communication of these issues outside of the schools. So I speak from my own personal experience this year at the Walton, which involved my 6-year-old daughter. She was involved in 2 situations where another 6-year-old engaged in rather explosive
So
physical. Yeah,
so I think in confidentiality,
Yeah.
it would be better if you could make a more general question about
This
what
is
your
it.
concern
This
is.
it,
And
'cause I want to lead
let's
up
not-
to this.
yeah, we don't wanna talk
This is
about
the communication piece. So
students.
I'm not talking
Yeah.
about individuals. Let's pretend it's a hypothetical. So this is the piece, though. But in the first incident, though, adults were hit while getting this kid under control. And in the second incident, the class had to be evacuated, which is, I'm happy about that, absolutely the right call. But as a parent, it was a tough week not knowing what was going on, what was going to happen in that classroom that day, the next day sending my child back. And thankfully, I will say this, it sounds like the situation is under control. So excellent job, Principal Byrne, thank you. But it was a bit jarring given the violent behavior involved a 6-year-old and not a high school kid. And in my experience, it was incredibly difficult to get the details because of FERPA, right? Because of exactly what was happening in the classroom. And I just wanted to know that appropriate steps were being taken to make sure that my child was safe. And after the second incident, we talked about the swirl, right? So the swirl that was happening on Facebook and the Walton community. And the first grade parents for the class, we held a meeting with Principal Byrne and Assistant Superintendent Lyons came in to discuss the issues. So thank you. Sorry, very helpful again. But we aligned to a better communication plan. But what was eye-opening for me in that meeting was that there's a serious lack of resources available at the Walton to address extreme behavioral issues. And I'm sure it's an issue for other Wakefield schools as well. And it's just studies and common sense show how important it is to start this preventative intervention early when you have a child with aggression issues. And in these types of situations, I know the school will do its part to help the child with the resources that it has, and I'm there, I support that 100%. But there are 23 other children in that classroom who become a part of that treatment plan. And as a parent, it's my job to make sure that my child is safe too. And during the meeting, there was extreme strong support for parents in attendance for additional help in that classroom, like an aide. So this poor teacher could get back to teaching a class of 24 first graders instead of focusing her time and effort on making sure this child didn't have another violent outburst that could seriously hurt someone. So to this day, there's still no aid, and that school is right now, it's a little bit of a war zone given all the construction that's going on. And I know the school is doing the best it can with the staff that it has, but that school, the volunteers, you've got parent volunteers coming in to run lunch right now because we don't even have the staff to cover lunch. So, we talk about trust, and I'm there, I'm trusting the administration, but we're being asked to trust the school that they're able to handle these safety risks with the available resources, and it sounds like the framework is there. I'm just not sure that's entirely robust at the Walton. And my takeaway from all this is that resources are an issue, and it sounds like FERPA can place some real restraints on understanding what's going on within the walls of the school, especially when the behavior can be impacting other students. And shifting gears to Nicholas Cruz for a moment, and the whole Parkland, Florida situation, the reports indicate that this child, so talking about Cruz, was on an IEP for very, very troubling behavior for years, and it was escalating throughout the years. And the school authorities, they were entrenched with getting this kid help and the process of helping him, and before potentially referring him to law enforcement. And I have no doubt that the school officials in that instance were doing the best that they could with the resources that they had, but they had likely reached the limits of what they could actually do. So then what? And I have to say that when you're dealing with IEPs for violent behavioral issues, that issue absolutely terrifies me, because these kids have serious rights. And I want to be clear that I'm not waging war on kids with IEPs, but I'm paying attention to the kids that show a propensity for violence. And it sounds like finding a placement for a violent child who needs additional support, it's not an overnight task. And I've learned that they can be suspended up to 10 days, so it's either, consecutively or cumulatively before a new placement can even be considered, absent the parent or the guardian providing consent for something earlier. But other than that, it seems the only other way that you're going to be able to speed up that process is if the kid brings a weapon to school, if there's drugs on school property, or they inflict serious bodily harm on someone else. Like, these are not great scenarios. And I hate the feeling of waiting around for something really bad to happen sometimes before more drastic steps can be taken with a violent kid. And then we have this whole manifestation determination, so that's the evaluation what's driving the behavior, and it seems that if the behavior is found to be a manifestation of the disability, that kid isn't going anywhere. And I get this isn't a Wakefield school administration rule, it's the reality of the laws right now, but what I want to know is that the Wakefield schools are being as aggressive and as creative as possible within the confines of those laws when it comes to keeping our kids safe. So if it's okay, I'm just going to kind of pepper the panel with a few questions here. So this threat assessment team, so is that the NEMLA, or is there an actual threat assessment team, and who's actually on it for Wakefield? Because this wasn't clear to me.
Okay, before, so you just said an awful
know I
lot
did. I
just
know I
then.
did. Yeah.
We listened carefully. So if you wouldn't mind, I think I just want to say a couple of things
Yeah.
about what you said, I think kind of maybe at the heart of it. First of all, there's a really, I think for all of our audience, there's a big difference between students, children of all ages, from elementary school all the way through high school, who have social emotional issues, who are struggling with anxiety or some other form of dysregulation. And a child with social emotional issues is very different than someone who is violent. And I think that's a really, really important distinction to make. Along those lines, and kind of going to, you mentioned a little bit about kind of, I think you were talking about exclusion law, and educating kids in the public schools. If we have a student that cannot be educated in the school setting, that they are an imminent danger to the general welfare of the school, we are allowed and continue to be allowed to exclude a student from the setting if they are at the level of being violent, or at the level of really, could create serious and imminent harm to other people in the school. And so we absolutely have that right. Under law, we have to continue, we're responsible for their education, but we can do that in an alternative setting if necessary. So I want to really assure people that there is a standard for that, and you can address it. But I think what is happening at really all schools, not just in Wakefield, but everywhere, there's a growing number of children with social emotional issues, and where school can be difficult, life can be difficult, there can be some dysregulation, and we work with kids in a caring and respectful and loving way, and their families, and all of our kids at all schools. And I want to also point out something very, very important. You talking about the Walton, and that's your experience, and thank you for sharing your experience as a Walton parent, but it's not a Walton issue. Walton has the same resources as every other school in the district. We have district-wide resources. We just in the last year's budget, we added a behavior coach, a certified behavior analyst, and other support systems that we can use across the district, and many other services as well. So we share our district resources, and sometimes people worry a lot about our two little schools, Greenwood and Walton, because they're smaller, but they have access to many district resources as well. So I know that often the immediate response that people are hoping for is that very quickly, can we get another aide in the classroom? But one of the things that we're very committed to in the Wakefield Public Schools right now is that when we do add staff, that it's going to be people who are highly qualified and certified in whatever that specific area we need, whether it's social emotional, whether it's academic, whatever that area might be that is needed. And so we're bringing those kinds of resources in, whether they're in the form of consult or just kind of strategic, or it's triage or whatever it might be, or permanently, and so we do those things. So I think if you could do you have maybe one question you could ask? We'll get some other people involved, and we can loop back around if you have a second or a third.
Yeah, let me just say the more applicable one here is, I just want to understand, so with this threat assessment team, I'm going to stick with one here. Just how would that group, your threat assessment team, so sticking with FERPA, so how is that group informed of potential threats within the confines of FERPA, and what can then be appropriately communicated out to the community? So I would just want to know, so if a kid actually brought a gun to the school, would we find out that a gun was brought to the school?
Yes, you would.
Okay.
With not even a hesitation,
Yeah.
yes, you would.
And I could save the rest of my questions. for
Okay,
Good.
all right.
Thank
Maybe you can loop
All
back
right.
around and give a few other people an opportunity.
Good evening, Chief Smith, Dr. Smith, and Chief Sullivan. Appreciate the opportunity. One of the issues that you made very clear is the difficulties in dealing with social media. And this is an issue that was brought up at the meeting in December. It's been brought up through multiple communications that you've had in January, in February, in March, and here we are in April. And the question I have is, what are you doing to try and effectively catch up so that you are communicating using the tools that many of us are communicating with, that our students are communicating with, that the educational staff is encouraging, and in some cases requiring our students to communicate with, that has a much faster speed and a much faster way of working with information, even incomplete information? Because as the incident that happened at the high school showed, the timing became ultimately among the worst parts for you to deal with. And I feel your pain. As someone who was on the school committee in the past, I understand that pain personally. I had to work with the news media as well. It's a very difficult situation. But what are you doing so that you can actually be a part of the situation that you can't control? Because as much as you may want to control that situation, Facebook can't control it, Twitter can't control it, Instagram, none of the tools can control the information. They can only control the platforms. But they do have the ability for you to join it and join us as using it as a vehicle.
That's really such a great point, Mr. Lieber. You know, I don't know if we're maybe a bit traditionalist in the fact that we use the email with we do have the text feature that you'll see sometimes we will use. Like when we went into shelter in place, if you were in the text system, you got the text message saying, see your email, so we're trying to get to people. But, you know, we really haven't used it. I don't know if the police department uses, or perhaps we should be thinking about, should we also be using Twitter or some other vehicle to maybe capture a quicker or wider audience. Is that what you mean by like our communication going out?
Making it two-way communication, because you will see communication, you will receive communication, and you can use it to broadcast as well.
Right.
It's a multifaceted media approach.
Right, but I think you were saying
the town
that's
is using
kind of
it. We
our
have-
participation
The town
in it.
has a chief marketing officer specifically to handle a lot of these types of issues. And I'm mentioning that just because it's something that I know on a town-wide basis they're struggling with as well. And within a school community, we see the tools growing at an incredible rate. Everything from, as you've mentioned, Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, there are Weibo, it goes on and on. There are literally dozens of them. Not all of them are used at all times, but being that is a way to communicate, and it really is a two-way communication, it becomes very effective. And you're not traditionalist. It may be follically challenged, it may be technologically challenged, but the idea of joining the younger, youthful movement, I think, will be very helpful, because most of us tend to be sandwiched between knowing the older ways of working and the ways that our children are working, where technology is what they literally grew up with, where many of us were kind of sandwiched between those generations.
Absolutely. Any thoughts on that, Chief?
You threw me under the bus on that one. Mr. Lieber, I want everybody to understand that the first thing we're going to do is make sure the information, we're more worried about the accuracy of the information, not the speed, the accuracy. It doesn't do us any good to put out a quick something or other that's not accurate. So I'll be right up front with you, and there's nothing that's going to come out until we can verify it. Now, we learned a lesson in the Boston Marathon bombing from Boston Police Department. Everybody learned a lesson that Twitter was their best friend. And they were able to mitigate a lot of issues. They were able to glean a lot of information. They spent a lot of time trying to sort out all the Twitter stuff that was flying back and forth. So in the police department, we have a Twitter feed, we have a web page, and we have a Facebook page. So we will always try going forward to do our best. I can't guarantee. We only have 47 people. So I can't guarantee that we're going to be right on that right away, because we have to make sure, we have to secure. This is This is a heavy lift when we get a threat that has some legs. It's a heavy lift for law enforcement, for the school department, and for the fire department. And there are a lot of pieces and moving parts that we have to bring together. But when we get that information, it's going to come out via an official source. And if we can get it out on Facebook, if we can get it out on our website, we're going to do our best to do that. It's not that we don't want to. It's not that we can't. We can. It's just a matter of getting it out there, making sure it's accurate, and making sure it goes out through the right media. And sometimes that doesn't happen right away because we're really busy and everybody else is really anxious, and we're trying to reduce that anxiety, at the same time make sure that we don't lose anything on the investigative side. So, are we moving in that direction? Yes, we are. How fast we get there depends on the situation. But again, whether it comes out in 10 seconds, or it comes out in 10 minutes, or it comes out an hour later, when it comes from an official source, it's going to be the official source. And for instance, at the vocational school, we couldn't do a press conference because of what was going on until almost 1:15 in the afternoon. So that tells you how busy we are. The other thing, too, is that we also have, from a police perspective, we also have other things that have to be dealt with while this is going on. So that sometimes draws our resources away from where we want to be. So we have to manage it the best we can do. But I will tell you this, if we put something out and it comes out from an official source, it's going to be accurate information, because the worst thing that ever could happen to us in the media world is to have to correct it. And if it's wrong, it could impact all of the parents that are in this room right now.
The other thing I might add is that Principal Byrne and I were just talking to a parent the other day and saying, we almost always put at the bottom of our emails, please call or email if you have any further questions, any questions at all, right? And I want you to know, like, that's not just like a tagline, like the kind of goodbye line, okay, Kim. We put that there because we mean it. And I will tell you, it is, I think every administrator in this room will tell you, it's so much easier to talk to somebody than the official email that goes out. Does that make sense? I answer, if you've ever tried to email me in any of these things, I answer every single email, every single one. Now, when I send something out, I'm always sending it out to 3,500 people or more. Like, my email list is, I think when I do it to everyone, it's over 4,000 people. But I answer every single email that comes back to me. If you have a question, if you have a concern, or just to acknowledge what you're thinking or feeling or wondering about, or sometimes I might even offer to call you, or would you like to call me, or would you like to meet in person, whatever it might be. And I know that the principals do that as well. And the reason that's really important is because there's so much more we can really talk about, and kind of explain and give you some background and help you understand exactly where we are or what's happening. And people, generally speaking, I think, for the most part, when I've actually interacted with them, people just feel so much better once they've had a chance to ask their question or get a specific question answered. And I just think that's really important. So just please know that we mean it. When we say, email me with a question or call us, I think there's a lot more we can really kind of discuss and kind of get to the heart of the questions and concerns that you have than you might get in the short email you get from me or Chief that just kind of gives you a status update. And those are very intentional. They're meant for a very broad audience. And you have to know that everything that comes out of my anything that I send out, usually anytime any one of these things are happening, I have calls from Channel 4, Channel 5, Channel 7, Fox, CNN, whatever, every news media outlet has also called me and are waiting for me to either release something or they're trying to get information too. So we are that's all the more reason we have to be very clear that what goes out is factual and is appropriate to be shared widely, because it will be shared widely. So something to think about. Okay, another question?
And it's done together. It's always done together, so that Dr. Smith isn't saying one thing, Chief Smith isn't saying another thing, and Chief Sullivan isn't saying another thing. It's done together, and it's done together for a purpose, because as they say, time is money. We have a very short period of time. We want to get the information out and then get back to work, because even if we have a PIO by our side, somebody has to brief that PIO with those facts. So, but whatever comes out, for the most part, is as a result of a joint conversation between the players, whoever that may be. It could be the deputy chief, the incident commander, whoever it is, but nonetheless going to come from an official source.
Now, I'm respectfully aware of the time. It's already 8:30, so I'm going to just, maybe a couple, people that might have a general question that might be helpful to everybody, and then we can break to our tables and we'll all be around to answer specific questions, and our crisis teams will be at their table to answer specific questions. So, go ahead, Chief.
No, I just wanted to make a brief statement that an emergency, any emergency needs to be mitigated, investigated, and the speed that occurs at is never going to match the speed of Facebook or Twitter or the internet. It just isn't. And you need time to develop what you want to find out. And it's just never going to keep up with it. We'll do the best we can. As Chief Smith says, it's extremely important to give accurate information during an emergency. So rushing to give a press release without confirming everything is just not going to be productive.
I actually knew maybe 2 hours before I sent it out that the Vogue threat was likely something that came from Maryland, but that was not a confirmed fact. And so it will not come out of my office until it's a confirmed fact. Once Chief said it is a confirmed fact, then I sent it out. So I think it's just really important to just kind of really emphasize that we will not share information that is not true and confirmed. Okay, just maybe just a couple of quick general questions for the whole group.
I think this is a general question. I just learned tonight that you have security here, a police officer, which I love that idea. And is there any plans for the schools, the elementary schools, to maybe not have security all day, but someone walking through periodically so there's someone near, just in case there is that crazy person with the rifle coming in that they can just act right away?
That's a great question, thank you. So we have Kelly Tobine as the school resource officer at the Galvin. Jason Seelings here is the resource officer at Wakefield Memorial High School. They're very active around town. They do go to the elementary schools. They help out with different issues or problems, but they do have to travel to get there. But they do spend time at our elementary schools. They get to know the elementary school children and teachers and adults. They help out with lots of issues. So I think they're very much a presence really throughout the district. But we also, we're in very close contact with patrol, and we can get help very quickly if we need it. Anything to add to that, Chief? Or?
No, the superintendent is correct. That's how it works right now. Right? Are there plans to put SROs in each school? No, not right now. I can tell you, haven't just done my budget in the last few days, not this year. I can guarantee you that. But that's not to say that it's not going to happen or that we're not going to investigate a different approach. We're always thinking forward. We're always thinking 10 yards downfield. And if there are ways that we can discuss and try to figure out what might work for the best of the community, then the command staff, we're going to have that conversation about what options are available to us. But as for now, I can't make you any guarantees on that. But again, Kelly and Jay, they're well known, as Dr. Smith said, they're well known in the community. They know the children. They're just not locked in this school. They participate in after-school events. They're around in the summer and off-school times. Tonight they're around. So they have a pretty vibrant relationship with the different kids in the town who go to different schools.
Thank you.
Hi, I just want to say thank you. This has been very helpful tonight. My question is regarding some of the drills that you do, and specifically the language that you use with different grade levels. And how do you balance getting the students to understand how important these drills are and taking them seriously without scaring them by telling them some of the very real scenarios you could possibly be training for? How do you find that balance?
So that's
at
a
the different
great
levels?
question, and anyone here that would like to weigh in, I'd be happy to pass the microphone. But one of the things that I think I put such great faith and trust in the people that are sitting right here. So I'm looking at teachers, Kathy Uver and Kristen Liberty and Sheila Barry and others, these teachers that, and Laurie Sokol, that work with the children at the younger age levels, and I think that they are experts at their age level. You know, they know what is developmentally appropriate to share with children, and I think they do a really great job at that, so that kids aren't frightened, but they know the seriousness. You know, when we practice a drill, this is very serious. You listen to your teacher, you respond. You know, I think when I listen, you know, at our district crisis team meetings, I think about how thoughtful Laurie is with the children at the Doyle Early Childhood Center. These children are 3 and 4 years old, and the language we use with them is certainly very, very different than other age levels. They even have a little storybook that kind of tells, you know, what we do in an emergency, right? So does anyone over here have maybe a thought to contribute on that at all? Okay, I guess really maybe that would be, oh, go ahead, Craig. Deputy Chief Calabrese.
And although the police, and we had people from the police department that were trained in Alice, we had people from the school department that were trained in Alice, and we had multiple meetings with elementary school teachers, we had them with middle school teachers, as well as high school teachers, and they basically told us what they thought that their kids could handle, and who should also deliver. We had police delivering the message to the older kids, when we had the, you know, kind of the overview before the drills, and then we had the teachers delivering it to the lower grades, and we put together PowerPoints, and we looked through books, and we really tried to gear it as best that we could to each grade level. Did we get it perfect? I don't know. I hope we do, but we really spent a lot of time trying to figure out what each kid could handle, and we used the words intruder for a lower grade, where a kid at the high school was going to get something at a higher level than a kid in third grade. So that's a real short answer to hours and hours and hours that we spent really trying to figure out what each grade could handle. We kind of just broke it up with K through 2, and then 3 and 4 had a little bit different, and then we went Galvin a little bit a higher level, and then high school, you know, to another level. So we're always looking to improve on our on the whole program, and that's something we're going to do moving forward. But we had a lot of collaboration on those things. It wasn't, we never wanted to be the police come in and say, this is how you should do that. It was, you know, a lot of relationships that were built to decide what each should handle. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, and then maybe another just connected piece is how well our school, our teachers, and our administrators know the children in their schools, like individually. So if we have kids that have a lot of anxiety, we know that. And if we're about to practice a drill, I think we're really just very thoughtful about all of our children.
We also debrief after every drill. And not only as a crisis team, as an administrative team, I reach out, principal of the high school, I reach out to my faculty after every drill, looking for feedback. Obviously, they're working with the students in their classrooms, so they're getting feedback in real time from their students. They share that with us, and we adjust our drills, we might adjust our language, we might adjust how we operate and implement drill the next time, and it's a constantly evolving process.
I think one thing to add on to that too is that we work very closely with the Wakefield Police Department, fire departments in these drills. And when we're running these drills, we're getting feedback from them as well on how we can improve, things we can do differently, and things that we did well. And I think to the credit of our school resource officers, they know our kids too. And I think that makes such an important part of that kind of community-based justice, that kind of sense of community that we have here. You know, Officer Jay, Officer Kelly, you walk into any building, the kids, they know who they are. And that's such an important relationship part of it. So they can ask them questions as well.
Thank you. We have maybe, oh, go ahead, Jay.
Jason Stills, I'm the high school resource officer. I just want to add, Mr. LaBerge, when we practice the styles drills, Kelly, myself, and Cody we're there with the kids can see us, we try to make them feel comfortable with the whole situation. But for me, what I want to do, I have a fifth grader, I have a second grader, so they learn the Alice program a certain way, but what I want to also send home, we try to give the parents, is all the links to the different information on how to teach the Alice. So you can show your kid more than what they're being taught. It's entirely up to you as a parent. But the main focus for me, for those younger kids, is to make them feel empowered, so that they feel like they have a choice to do something. Of course, the kids are going to follow the instructions of their adult. But if they know a little bit more, perfect, it's going to carry that for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely. If you ever saw our kids in action during the drills, they're so amazing. They really are. Our kids are amazing.
I think it's just important to note that all of our drills are multidisciplinary, they're age appropriate, and in the case of the very, very young children, they don't necessarily need to know why the drill is being done. They just need to practice following instructions from the teacher, and that's good enough.
Yes.
Hi. First, I'd like to say thank you very much. I do appreciate this, and that I do trust you, and I trust you with my children. We're longtime Wakefield residents. But the question I have is, do we need to take it a step further? And I want to take the finances out of it, but I can't get onto an airplane without going through security. I can't even go to a Celtics game without going through a metal detector and someone looking in my backpack. I can't get into my building at work without scanning a badge and going through an electronic system. Are these things that we need to start considering for our schools? I know there's a financial implication, and I know and appreciate that the doors are locked, but one time my wife and I went into the high school, and it was just a matter of timing. Student was walking out, we walked right in, right? Should there be one door where there is a security officer at every single school, that is the only way in, that's the only way out? Obviously not if there was a fire or emergency, but do we need to take a step further? Do we need to be more proactive? Understanding all these other issues, but to me, that would be a simple but expensive step to prevent something from happening.
It's interesting. I have a thought, and maybe, Chief, you can. My thought on it, I actually, my first thought is the go-to isn't the financial piece, but really the culture of a school and how a school works and what it's like for kids to go there every day and to live and learn together. And I was back when I was still teaching at Wakefield High School. We went through, I don't know who else was there for this, we went through this rash of bomb threats for this period of 4 years. All of a sudden they ended, and everyone just said, well, I guess the kid graduated, because we were not really sure exactly. I guess the administration was never really able to get to the bottom of it. This is way back when I was in the classroom. But anyway, the reason I bring that up is during that period of time, NIMLEC STARS came in. They have the resources. They have the metal detectors for us, should we ever need them. And because we were having these threats, we did use them. And we had the single entry metal detector. Kids could not bring backpacks to school. If they did, they had to leave them outside. Every kid was checked. Actually, Deputy Chief Calabrese and I were reminiscing on this the other day. And how long did it take us to get the kids in every day? Couple hours. I mean, it was, it's a very, and it's not, the kids, it's very anxiety provoking. It's not an efficient way to start school every day. It's maybe not the way we want our kids to feel when they come to school to learn every day. So I think that there are some real implications. It's that sort of, kind of weighing out what is the right and the best way. So I can tell you that my opinion is, I think that we can keep our kids safe without having to go quite that far. But if there is some kind of a situation going on where we have some information, some credible information that we could have not a secure campus, I mean, we could go to it immediately and have the resources to do it. So that's really my opinion, but I think that this is the dialogue everyone's having right now, right? Is how much is too much, and really kind of thinking about that.
Well, I appreciate your question. It's an excellent point. We just had this discussion 2 days ago about this, and yes, let's take the money out of it, but yes, in an emergency, we have access to all that stuff. But our goal, we're talking children here. We're not talking about adults who can change and adapt. The goal is to get them safely into the school. The best defense we have right now is communication, knowing the students. The Assistant Superintendent Lyons, we had a conversation the other day, and he made the point that the best tool we have in the toolbox in the Wakefield Public Schools is we know our kids. And I understand your position. Somebody walked out and you walked in. That happens, it's going to happen. But we do have reduced access to the schools. Those points of access are manned in the morning by a staffer, by an administrator. So we take everything, we put everything that we have out there, trying to get them in and out of the weather. There's nothing worse than having 1,000 school kids at the high school standing out in a snowstorm while they go through a metal detector. That's gonna cause a problem for the rest of the day. Our goal is to get them in safely, and the way we do that is because we know the kids. If we have an idea, if we have a feeling, somebody tells us there's something going on, then we take the next level. But I think the level we're at now is a safe level. It's an efficient level, and the kids have accepted it. So when they come to school, they know they only can go in X door or Y door or X and Y door, whatever it is, and then they move on and go on with their day. We can make that decision going forward, but we want to keep the school environment a school environment. We don't want the school environment an armed camp. That's not good for learning. It's not good culturally for the kids, and it's not going to help anybody at this point.
And I think in addition, for the many reasons, we're hoping to someday soon address Wakefield High School, a new or renovated school. I heard Andrew Tetral talking about all of the safety features of this building. I think it's just yet another compelling reason to, be able to upgrade our high school as soon as it is possible.
Just to follow up on that, though, Dr. Smith, we're constantly working this. This doesn't happen on September 5th, and then we don't do anything about it for the rest of the year. We talk about this constantly. The crisis teams talk about it constantly. We're going through a process now. We're going to start to update our charts and our books and our manuals on how we're going to respond. And that communication with police, fire, the school department, emergency management, it's always an act. It's always moving. It's a dance. It's always moving. We're like a shark. We never stop moving. We never lay down and sleep. And that's what we do. So, right now, across the country, and I can tell you this for a fact because I travel across the country a lot in my job, they're shying away from metal detectors because it impacts the school environment in a negative way. I hope that answers your question. And I certainly understand it because you go into enough buildings, you can't get in unless you're badged in. I get it. We get it, But thank you, sir.
I mean, there's, just on the surface, there's more security at where I go to work and going to a Celtics game.
Sure.
But our most vulnerable citizens are our kids. So
That's right.
Do we need to take that step?
And the difference between a Celtics game, being a Bruins fan, Bruins game, and our kids is we know our kids. That's the difference. When you're dealing with 13909, guy from the old garden, I remember that number, it's imprinted on my brain, 13909. When you have 13,909 people going into a stadium that you don't know, it's a little bit of a different environment than,
Oh, no, completely agree.
Yeah.
No, completely agree.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. One last question, and then we'll give people a chance to break out, ask us individual questions.
All right, so this will actually not be a question to answer today, but more a suggestion for something to think about. First of all, I just echo everyone else who said thank you for doing this. Not only is tonight helpful, but it's clear that everyone in the school department, the police and fire have this as a top priority, and I know this is something you focus on, so I appreciate you taking this seriously. The comment and suggestion that I wanted to make was just in relation to some of the questions and feedback that there's been around sort of incidents in the classroom with particular students, similar to what the first person who spoke addressed. I think as a parent, and I've got kids at Walton and Woodville, my kids have been sort of in the classroom when these incidents have happened, and one of the things that's, I think, challenging for those of us on the parent side, and I think maybe drives some of the anxiety and questions that have been generated on social media, is that we don't really understand sort of what the process is, what the procedure is, how you sort of decide how to interact and engage in that moment when an incident happens. And so I'd suggest that maybe some general education for parents around what the process is, what those triggers are, how you engage outside resources, I think would be really valuable for us in terms of understanding sort of how these things unfold so that we're not addressing an incident that happened, but we know that there's a plan for something that may happen in the future, and we've got a little bit more, I think, comfort in understanding what that means for our kids. It certainly is something that produces some anxiety, and I think you see that a lot from everyone who comments. But again, I think there's an opportunity for us to maybe learn a little bit more and understand how that works so that we can hopefully alleviate some of that.
Thank you. That's a great suggestion, and I think we can do some more proactive work around that. Just as you were talking, I was thinking about all of these opportunities like Parent University, or other opportunities, school-based or district-based kind of parent sessions for that kind of thing, to just kind of learn more. And then in addition to that, like I say, any opportunity for individual conversation gives us a great opportunity to tell people more, answer questions directly. So maybe some proactive group work, but also just, I hope, just keep passing the word. Don't ever hesitate to call us, to come in and sit down with us individually. Just in recent days, I had a really nice long conversation with someone around some of the laws and regulations in education and how they work and how we work around them. And I could just in having that conversation with a parent, I could just see how helpful it was to that parent to just understand more of that, and how many things we really do have, and what the time things take, and what we can communicate, what we do communicate, all of those things. So thank you. It's a very thoughtful suggestion. Appreciate it. All right, well, you've been so patient. This went longer than we had anticipated, but our crisis teams will be outside for the next 20 minutes to answer any school-based or individual questions you have. If anyone doesn't know how to update your emergency information and would like help, there'll be a table for that as well. And I'll say, why don't the chiefs and I and Assistant Superintendent Doug Lyons will stay here for individual questions as well. All right, but thank you for joining us very much.